This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on the payoff with Pete's stories of sobriety. We got a great story of sobriety. This dude's name is Bill Sibley. I say this dude because you haven't heard of him yet, but you're about to. And afterwards, you won't be able to get enough. Bill Sibley is 35 years sober as of today or tomorrow, I guess, May 1st. And, this is probably going up May 1st or 2nd. So props to Bill for 35 years. He's a musician. He hit rock bottom. And if Bill can get sober, you can get sober. Okay. This guy was literally walked out of a town or a city in Texas. And just like they walked him to the state line to the city line, they're like, do not come back in here. That's part of the story. And he kept going a little bit after that too. So the payoff with Pete, Bill Sibley's coming up. I'm telling you, you're going to love it. Little piece of Texas for you today. But first, my main man, Kevin Sousa. Get started. Bill S. You're a musician, you're a personality, yes. but you end up here talking to me because you're sober. And
yes,
I want to start the conversation off with what is your sobriety date?
Well, I count it as tomorrow, but today was the day of my last drink. But I don't count my sobriety date until I went to my first meeting, which would have been tomorrow, 35 years ago.
35 years ago. And so
yes.
you were born in Texas?
Yeah, Waxahachie.
So talk to me a little bit about your upbringing. What was it like? Was there, for me, I'm sober 13 years, and a big part of my upbringing was there was a lot of alcohol around on the premises, right? It was a very as much as my mom and my dad didn't want me drinking, it was a very alcohol-friendly household. You didn't have to look too far to access it. What was it like for you growing up?
Well, my grandfather was an alcoholic, but he sobered up before I was born. And but every once in a while he'd dabble,
Uh-huh.
We had some moonshine. Ken folks that made moonshine out here at Goat Neck, out there for Meridian. And we'd go out there and buy moonshine every once in a while. But I was raised pretty much by my grandparents until I was about 7 or 8. And then we moved with my mom. And she had a lot of troubles, lawyer and everything. So we was around drinking and stuff like that too, And
that's interesting. Did you know that your grandfather was like drinking was no good for him? Did you know that as a kid?
Yeah, my grandmother had said that he used to drink really, really bad when he was younger. And then when he bought the farm, he lost his arm in a cotton gin. But when he got the farm, he kind of straightened up. And, but he never was quite sober. And when I was 10 or 11, he had a car wreck, and somebody ran in the back of him. And they gave him pain medication. And he went back to drinking, because he never was in recovery. He just works all the time.
Yeah.
And he had one lung was gone from smoking, and he had a grant on the way in Alvarado, and punctured the other one, and that's how he died.
Oof. Man.
So he died when I was 10.
And so you start to move around with your mom. You mentioned like there was trouble there. How much of that can you share? Like, what was that like for you?
Well,
No.
she had a lot of, back then, they didn't, when people had trouble mentally, they just would give them shock treatments. They would just electrocute them, basically. And I grew up, she had a lot of that. She was in LH2 shut house, and that she just had a lot of trouble. And she would have a lot of depression and stuff like that. And they would give her shock treatments, which didn't help, it made it worse.
Yeah.
And she was a beautiful woman. I mean, just gorgeous. But we went through several stepdads. And we, some abuse, and different things. But, it's just, when I was 13, I started getting in a little trouble.
What's a little bit of trouble?
I stole a school bus. And actually accidentally burnt down a house. The house was, we were going to go to California in the school bus, and I took this school bus, and we were going to go to California in it, me and this other guy, and the bus broke down, and we got in this old abandoned house and built a fire in the fireplace. But I threw 6 of those airplane bullets in the fireplace to see what they'd do. And guess what they do?
Oh,
They blow up.
oh my God.
So I always tell people I grew up in Johnson County Jail.
So you obviously you didn't make it out of Texas and headed to California. You didn't make it very far.
No. I was 13, so.
Yeah. Well, so when did, I mean, what was drinking around this incident? Was that your escape? I know music was part of it too.
I didn't start drinking and stuff until I was about 14. And when I had to work. I'd been doing carpenter work with my stepdad since I was, 9, 10 years old. So I worked every summer and all the weekends doing carpenter work. And we were doing trim work on Charlie Pride's house.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And them guys would stop by the bar at night, drink, and I wasn't old enough to go in. So they left some beer in the car and some barbecued Fritos to eat. And so I drank all that beer while I was sitting there waiting on them and ate all that barbecued Fritos and got sicker than a dog. But I never ate barbecue Fritos since.
Yeah, but you drank a lot, didn't you? After that?
Yeah, I should have quit them. I should have keep eating the barbecue Fritos and not drink the alcohol.
So what was it like after that? Because that's exactly what happened to me. I was like in 6th or 7th grade. I had a big experience like that, drinking a lot. Maybe I was in like 7th grade, and I got sick, but it didn't have any kind of impact on the next time I was going to drink.
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
I blamed the barbecue Fritos. I didn't blame the beer.
When did it start to become a part of your everyday life, Bill?
Well, I was on drugs.
Sick.
It was back in the hippie days,
Yeah.
And I never felt like I was a part of. I mean, I was popular in school. I played football, basketball, baseball, and boxing, but I always didn't feel like I felt alone my whole life,
Yeah.
And when we got into the hippie days and everybody doing drugs together, and it was like that became my family. And we were doing hard drugs. I was using needles and, and all that stuff when I was 15 and 16 years old. And so it was, and I would go back and forth, try to get off the drugs. I'd start drinking, and then pretty soon I'd be doing both.
Yeah, I totally get that. That's a lot of my story too. We're the worst chemists in the world, right? We're always trying to figure out what the right degree of this and that, what will make me what I want to feel.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that. When you're doing these hard drugs and you're part of the hippie scene, is music a big part of that?
Yeah. One time I had gotten a guitar, and this guy that was an okay guitar player, I thought he was crazy at the time, but now I find out he was okay. But he told me that I would never be able to play the guitar because my fingers are too short. They are pretty short, but short and stubby. So I just gave it up, and that was when I was 17 or so, and I've always had this thing about music, and it would really sink in deep, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and I always felt like I could pick up stuff pretty quick, but like I'd sit down to a piano and I could kind of start making songs on the piano. I never had a piano,
Wow.
but I didn't. That's why you should never listen to people.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
About what you can and can't do.
Yeah, no, you can't listen to people tell you what you can and can't do. Sometimes, a lot like you though, maybe that's the alcoholic personality. Like it sometimes will add fuel to the fire. Tell me I can't do something.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, unfortunately, you got addiction and alcoholism in your bones, but you also have music in your bones. When does the alcohol, when is the alcohol and drugs, like, is there a moment in time where you're trying to stop and you can't? Because we're talking about heavy duty stuff. You can't just you don't just go cold turkey off the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah, I was more on the speed type drugs, but the alcohol was, it was legal, easy to get to, and I tried to quit several times, and, and I just couldn't seem to do it. I remember one time I'd quit for like 30 days, and I was living in Whitney,
Yeah.
and I I I would just go to church, play basketball, and work all the time, and go fishing. And my sister came by, and she stayed the weekend, and she said, "Does it bother you for me to drink?" And I said, "No, don't bother me. I got it figured out now." And I said, "All I got to do is just work and go fishing. I got it."
Yeah.
And she left that Sunday, and next Monday I went over around the corner to buy. I bought a refrigerator for $50, and the guy told me, said, "You don't think we ought to tie that down?" I stood it up in my truck, And I said, "No, I'm just going around the corner." And I went around the corner, and that refrigerator fell out of the truck. And I remember the last thing I saw was the compressor flying up in the air. And I didn't even stop. I just kept going to the beer store. And I stayed drunk for 2 years over that $50 refrigerator.
Holy crap.
I blamed the refrigerator, but I was just looking for reasons.
Oh, dude. So what happens to your life in over those 2 years? Around how old?
I went to prison.
Oh, you did? So what did you do to end up in prison?
What I do to end up?
Yeah.
We were still in Whitney,
Uh,
and I went with a guy to the liquor store that was on the other side of the lake, and the Muskie County Police pulled us over. And as they were pulling us over, the guy hands me a sawed-off shotgun. He said, "Stick this under the seat." And I said, "Oh no!" Back then, it was a bad deal to have something like that.
yeah.
I guess it still is. I don't know, but I shoved it under the seat, but they found it, and then I got probation, but yeah, an alcoholic on probation ain't gonna make it.
No, absolutely not. What were some? So, did you find any sobriety when you were incarcerated, or was that just like no?
Now, uh, you know, when I went into prisons, it was rough back then.
What year around?
82, 80,
Okay.
somewhere around in there. Maybe 87, 87.
Okay.
But I got in trouble in 85, I think. It took a couple of years because they sentenced me to go to prison, and I took off and told me 30 days to get my business in order.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We always got to get our affairs in order, right?
Yeah, well, that just gave me 30-day head start. So I ran for 3 years.
And then they got you. They bring you in, and so prison was rough. But that's kind of look, man. You got nothing to lose, right? That's kind of what it is. And for me, at least, you're driven by the alcohol and the drugs. You get into prison, and it's rough, right? As you said, there's no sign of recovery.
Yeah, no, and I went to a few meetings while I was in there just to get out of my cell. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And but it seemed like when I went into prison, it was like I shut my brain off. It's just I just wouldn't. I didn't want to think about all the terrible things I did. I didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a way to recover when you don't. When you're not thinking.
Yeah.
And then when I got out, I said, I will never, all the way the bus ride, all the way from Huntsville. I said, I will never, ever, ever drink again. I said that all the way on the bus ride. Right. And we got back to Alvarado to my mother's house.
How long was that bus ride?
Oh, it was about 6 hours, 8 hours, something like that. But I said that, and I was determined never to drink again. And that lasted about a week. I had a friend come by, and he said, well, I know you're not drinking because I told him on the phone before he came by. He said, and he just wanted to see me, and we went out to the lake, Alvarado Lake. He said, you don't mind if I drink? I said, nah, I got this now. Here we go again.
Yeah.
And it lasted about an hour. I said, hand me a beer out there. And I knew when I drank what was going to happen. Every time. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew I was going to hit that brick wall again. It was the same thing.
And that's the power of addiction, right, fellas?
Yeah.
You know you're going to hit that brick wall, and you don't care. You don't give a shit.
You do it anyway.
Like, you know what? I don't care.
I could shut my brain off.
Yeah. Well, and eventually the alcohol, whatever you put in your body, will do it for you if you can't compartmentalize. What happens to you leading up? So now we're getting towards the end of the 80s. Any major consequences that lead you to that jumping off point where you're like, I mean, you mentioned to me on the phone this morning, and I love it. They had to escort you out of Grand Prairie.
Grandview.
Okay, out of Grandview. So walk, get me up to like exactly what was that?
This is my album cover.
Okay,
that's the street in Grandview. I went back and took a picture of the street.
No. Brett, what happens when you you get out of prison, you start to drink again, and then you have all this time? You mentioned the album. I do want to ask you: are you playing music at this point?
No.
No, not at all. So you go back. So you back out into the wild out of prison, and then after a little bit, a week, you're back drinking again.
Yeah, I had a parole officer that just hated me.
Oh yeah,
They were picking on me all the time.
yeah.
But I went that almost 3 years, and I was going to get some drugs. And I used to hang out with my first wife's mother there. She was an alcoholic, and we drank a lot,
Uh-huh.
and I would hang out with her to drink with, and I went by to borrow her car to go get some drugs, and she was sitting on the couch, and I'll never forget she had a bucket to get sick in, and her face was gray, just like a gray shirt. I never seen nobody with a face gray that was alive.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, "You look terrible. You didn't know how." But I went borrowed a car, went got my drugs, came back, and I left it there. Then a day or so later, they said she was in the hospital, that her lungs collapsed. And I named off a bunch of stuff. And I went and seen her. And she weighed about 95 pounds normally. But in the hospital bed, she was huge. Huge. I guess all the food and stuff. And then I went back home, and that night they called me and they said she had died. And I remember on her coffee table was a can of Old Milwaukee. She was dying, and she was still drinking that Old Milwaukee, getting sick. And I said, "That's me." And I'm not a religious person. It's still not just super religious, but I said, "God," I said, "I'm not asking you to help me quit." I said, "Make me quit." Well, you gotta watch that. If you ain't ready, you better watch that there.
Right. And so what happens?
Everything. Anything that could have possibly happened to me happened. I lost everything. I ended up homeless, and my wife had threw me out. And I was staying in this little camper in between Alvarado and Grandview, and I had been told by the police department in Grandview not to come back to Grandview. And I had my son, so he was 8, and so it was just too hard on him. He would have followed me off a cliff,
Mhm.
and I just couldn't do it anymore to him because I knew I was on my way down. I knew I'm stupid. I knew I was dying, and so I took him back to Grandview. And as soon as I got to his mother's apartment complex, the Grandview Police Department went, around him. And I looked at him and I said, and I thought to myself, I'll never see him again. And so I turned around and walked off. And this was during the middle of the day, during the week, in Grandview, Texas, which is a very small town.
Yeah.
And the police had their lights on behind it. And they walked me right through the center of that town during the middle of the day. It has that brick pavement, downtown.
Yeah.
And all these people would come out And they were standing on the sidewalk in downtown in front of the buildings. And I can still close my eyes and see their faces.
Wow.
There was so much disdain. And it was, and right then I said, I'm done. I wasn't done. I didn't think I could quit drinking, but I was done living. I wasn't going to live like that no more. And I knew I couldn't quit.
What action did you take? That's like a really scary place for people.
Yeah. I wasn't afraid to die. I was more afraid to live. And I got back to that little camper. It was one of those little round teardrop looking campers.
Uh-huh.
It was real old. And that night, I had this much whiskey left in the bottle. And those little stoves that's in a camper, you got to light. Well, I finished the whiskey and I turned that stove on and didn't light the stove, just let the gas run. And then I laid down and wasn't afraid to die. I knew I was going to die. I wanted to. And the next morning, which would be 35 years this morning, I woke up and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And a normal person would think, I didn't die last night. First thing I thought of is, oh no, I drank that whiskey. What am I going to do now? That's the power of addiction right there.
So what did you do?
I went outside. It's like, and I was walking around to the front, and the tanks are on the front. And the tank of butane had ran out.
No. Wow.
Or I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be talking.
And so did you go to a recovery meeting?
No. I went to my mother's house, and she had come to find out she had MS. That was part of her problems that they finally diagnosed us.
Jeez.
But she was in a wheelchair. And I went to her house, and I just wanted to come in and get a drink of water. And she said, honey, I've done all I can. I love you with all my heart. But she said, I can't let you in. Because, we're like salesmen. If we ever get our foot in the door, we're there.
Yeah.
And she sent me away, and I was at 67 and 35. I don't know if you've ever been there in Alvarado. That there's two bridges, one, under the highway. And these trucks were crossing. And I said, I got up and I was going to step in front of one of them trucks. And about the time I was going to step over the line, this voice came in my head, or this thought came in my head, or something. Said, if it doesn't kill you, it's going to hurt. And I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid, and I didn't want to hurt.
Yeah.
So I sat back down and I just put my head in my hand. And I said, God, I got myself here. I said, either kill me or show me where to go. Yeah. And I got up and I started walking towards Cleveland. I was detoxing by then pretty good.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was I was seeing stuff or what, but I turned around and looked under that bridge, and I was still sitting there. It's like I walked away from myself, And I walked about maybe 100 yards, and I wasn't hitchhiking, and this car pulled over. The guy said, "You need a ride?" He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Cleveland." And so I got in the car. And come find out he was a 7-day Adventist preacher. How weird is that?
And is he selling you on it or what?
Huh?
Is he selling you on it when he picks you up?
No, he was just wanting, he just gonna give me a ride, I guess. I guess somebody told him to give me a ride. But he took me to this church up there in Cleveland, and a friend of mine was assistant pastor, and they put me in this hotel that was a drug infested, terrible place to be. But that's where I sobered up at. In this drug infested hotel. I went to an AA meeting that night. Oh well, recovery meeting.
Yeah.
And my he was sitting there, and he said, after I got through, they called on me, and I said, my wife's a crazy thing. That's the first words that was out of my mouth at a meeting. Still blaming other people. And at the end of the meeting, the guy said, you don't have to live that way anymore if you don't want to. And I can still hear that today, and I went to meetings for 2 years without missing a meeting.
No shit.
2 years.
And what's starting to happen to you internally and externally? Like when I always say, like, because I was the same, I had the gift of desperation where like there was no place I could go. I was either going to die or I had to go headfirst into recovery. And recovery started to make me feel the same way that some of the alcohol and drugs had. It was a really amazing thing. What was your experience like with that?
Well, my wife was living with my drug dealer, and I didn't know which one I missed most, him or her. And so I was so angry about this. And I was, after you've been sober for a few weeks, feelings start coming. And anger, everything was anger with me. I was so angry about this. And that old man said in the meeting, I was complaining about her living, with my drug dealer. And he said, I was talking, and he interrupted. And he said, if she didn't want to be with him, she wouldn't be. And it's like I ain't no cross talking. And it's like, it made me so mad that he said that to me. He didn't know who I was. I mean, I was a homeless drunk and who I was.
Yeah.
But it made me so mad. And all that next day I was working, for this guy. The more I thought about it, the madder I got. I was going to tell that old man off when I got into that meeting. How and that night I went to the meeting and I was going to let him have it. I mean, I was going to leave him all of it. And I was sitting there, and the more in that meeting, the madder I got, the more and it was going around, and I felt like my head was going to explode. I was so angry. And it was coming right next to me. And I looked up and I saw that serenity prayer. It said, God grant me this serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know difference. And I don't know what that means to other people, but I know what it meant to me. It meant that I realized for the first time in my life, and I was 33, that all that anger that I was feeling was coming from inside of me. It wasn't coming from them. It wasn't coming from him. It wasn't coming from her. It was coming from here. And that was something I could do something about. And, I hadn't had hope in so long that when I realized that, it gave me that little bitty crack of light. And that's all I needed, was just a little bit of hope. And it gave me hope. And
that is amazing. And I think that's one of those things that gives me goosebumps. But you mentioned it too, and I appreciate how it's it's not your first day, right? You're like 3 weeks or a month, and something like that happens, and you're like, oh my gosh, it takes a minute, and it's not like a white light experience per se, but it is like, whoa, your mind starts to work differently, and your perspective is shifting, and you're like, wait a minute, I gotta say it in some of this stuff, right?
Yeah. Because one of my sayings used to be, I'd see people in church jumping around and all that stuff. And I'd see, these people, and it's like, how do you change who you are? And I started to realize that that's not who I am. That's who I had became.
Hmm.
And that, and for the first time, I realized that this program, recovery, could work for me.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, like you said, that's that little thread of hope. That's sometimes you just need a little.
A little.
When did you start to play music? Like, how did that come into your life?
I never stopped doing anything easily.
Yeah.
After I quit drinking and drugging and all this, and I went through the steps, I started my own, had a construction business. I remodeled restaurants, and I did okay. And but I smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I would have smoked 4, but I didn't have time. You got to sleep sometime,
Yeah.
But I would try, I think, well, I need to quit. Every time I think about quitting, I'd light up a cigarette. Just thinking about it made me want to smoke.
Yeah.
And then I had a heart attack. That place that I went to, that church I went to, I had went to a funeral for a friend of mine over at that church. Well, that pastor that was there when I sobered up, he said, "How you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm doing good." I said, "Just got over pneumonia," and he said, and he just grabbed me and started praying on me and all this stuff. And a couple of weeks later, I had heart attacks. And so I quit smoking. But and we were at a restaurant here in town, and I walked in, and there he was, and he come running up to me to see me, and I said, "Don't you touch me." I said, "Every time you touch me, something bad happens to me." He just died laughing. He thought that funny. But I did quit smoking, but a year or so later, I started playing guitar just to kind of relax in my room, in my office, just in here. And I'd look up and it'd be about 2 hours later.
And by the way, how old are you when you're doing this? You're in your late 30s, early 40s, right? 50s. Yeah. So like that says a lot about being a teachable human being and being sober, that you're willing to start something new at 50 years old.
Yeah, I did it just mainly just because I've always been kind of wound up,
Yeah.
And I did it to kind of relax. And then I got a little bit better, still not very good at it. But I played harmonica and played the guitar. And then I started playing with a little group around. We played different places. But I got a weird voice and stuff. So I was sitting there one night and I was trying to play. And my wife's in there, is in recovery too.
Yeah.
And so But Julie, I'd met her in recovery, and we had a child together that never drank, never smoked, never done anything like that. He plays in the church band with Josh Weathers. But I was sitting there one day and I was trying to learn a song of somebody that had a good voice. And my wife's a nurse. And nurses are sure. They'll tell you their opinion whether you want to hear it or not. And she's a strong-willed woman, so and she came in, I was playing this song, I'm trying to sing. And she said, "That sounds terrible." She said, "Quit trying to sound like everybody else." And she said, "Sing it the way you'd sing it." Well, that hurt my feelings. So I put my guitar up, and I didn't play it for about a month. And then one night I sat there and I picked the guitar back up and I learned the same song, but this time I sang it the way that I'd sing it. And it's like the whole world opened up of music. And Steve Seskin, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he wrote Life's a Dance. He told me, he said, "You got to be yourself and everybody else takes it."
And so I want to go backwards a little bit before we get back into the music. So what your first 10 years of recovery and stuff, it sounds like some amazing stuff is happening. You meet this woman, she becomes your wife, you have a child. What were you doing in the rooms of recovery that was enabling you to live free outside of recovery? Because I was saying to somebody last week, right? Like, recovery and meetings, it's actually a bridge to life. It's not a tunnel to more meetings. I think a lot of people come in new and they're like, "Well, I don't want to, all the crap you tell yourself, it's all BS." But what were you doing that was enabling you to be this person you are today that's wearing life like a loose shirt?
Well, I coach baseball. Believe it or not, I started them I started coaching these kids when they were little. They were 7, 8 years old, 6, 7, 8, and then I coached them even on the summer leagues in high school. And that team went to the state championships.
Huh.
So I was busy doing that a lot. But and making me reset it. And I used to tell my story a lot, but it's just staying involved and still making meetings. I still make meetings.
Yeah, I can tell. And it's weird because, and I know this in myself, and I see it in you. That's kind of why we do this stuff. We talk to each other. Like, I can tell that you're plugged in, and it makes me want to be more plugged in, because if I'm, I've got a bunch of stuff in my experience that I can share, but I'm only as useful as what I'm here. You know what I mean? Like how engaged I am, because that's when I have something to say. Like I'll talk now for the next couple days to other alcoholics. So probably I got to a meeting yesterday. I'll get to a meeting tomorrow probably, and hopefully the next day. But I'll be sharing a lot about what you told me, because you got so much great stuff. I'm like, that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Like staying engaged, but being engaged, not like okay, I got mine, and so I'm gonna step aside because I don't win, and then other people in recovery don't win. Like now you've got this life. You mentioned your kid, your wife. How did that round you out as a person? You came from rough beginnings, and now here you are, sharing this story and talent through music, but you're also sharing it through people, your wife and your son.
Yeah, and that I think getting so low and then having a heart attack changed me too, because it made me appreciate every single day. Because I had a heart attack. I mean, they care flighted me to Fort Worth.
Okay.
And, They weren't sure I'd ever make it. But
And you're
that
sober at the time.
uh,
And you were sober at the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't afraid or anything. I think, but but coming to the point where you are ready to give up your life, uh, it it makes you appreciate being sober. It made me appreciate. I think about it a lot. And we've lost a lot of people in recovery. So a lot of my songs are about recovery because that's so big a part of my life.
Yeah. And so when did you start to weave in, you know, uh, the vibes of recovery and this experience you have that you're sharing with us now? When did you start to weave that in as part of the fabric of your musical work?
Well, I was playing in a band, and everybody in the group was in recovery.
Oh, okay.
That helps when you're playing in places. But uh, we were pretty tight knit. And one day there was a songwriter and the guy that write songs in the band. He was really good. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try to write songs. And I wrote this song, and and I played it out, and people loved it. And it's like, huh. And I realized that I had that in my head. That's what that was in my head the whole time, my whole life, but I didn't know what it was. And and so I I started writing, and the first year I started writing, I was selected Texas Troubadour Songwriter of the Year. And it's like I didn't even know my songs were any good. you know, and 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 I write songs because I'm not I got a weird voice, drinking and drugs and all that, with smoking. But uh I write songs to fit my voice. And I started writing songs, and I love blues, always have. I used to listen to Jimmy Reed when I was young and stuff like that. And so I wrote some blues songs, and I started playing them out. And people liked them, and then in 2020, I was selected to represent North Texas in the International Blues Challenge in Memphis, and things kind of took off from there. And then COVID hit, and everything kind of landed,
Yeah.
bounced on the runway. But I just do it for the fun, though. I'm not, I just enjoy sharing my music.
Well, what about, you talked earlier, you had like almost what it sounded like perfect ear, right? You could sit at the piano and play, and you didn't even know how to play the piano. You never been around a piano. And, you always, like you said, you have this voice or this talent in your head. And you rid yourself of all the alcoholism and all the blocks, and you have to work on all the crap that's in the way of you and the sunlight of the spirit getting through. But you are able to tap into these gifts, like that you have, and I love that because it goes back to what you said. Like, that's not who you were; that's who you became. So you now are who you were supposed to be. Like, what is that like for you to be able to share that with the rest of the world? This is a dude who tried to turn on the stove, but you ran out of gas. I mean, like, seriously, like, and now here you are. It's a pretty, it's a tale filled with gratitude talking to you now.
Yeah, I could write a book with all the crazy stuff that I have to do.
Yeah,
But I did.
sure.
But yeah, I really appreciate because I only do original music now.
Mm.
I don't do any covers. And when I do a song or something, especially one like uh, The Gift, I got a song on my second album called The Gift that I wrote about my mom.
And by the way, for people that are listening, we're going to put all this information in the show notes so people can click on it and access it easily and listen to your music. But go ahead.
Yeah, and to look out and see somebody wipe a tear away from their face or something, that's the most rewarding thing you can get is to have people, to be able to connect with people through music like that. And I don't care about making money. I'd rather somebody tap their foot or wipe a tear away from their eye.
That's a real musician.
Yeah, it's that.
What do you say to people who, because here you are, you're playing now. It sounds like you play with people who are sober, but you're probably playing in places where there's alcohol, right? That's part of the deal. Yeah. How were you able to become the type of person, the type of sober person, where you were able to go, tap into your gifts wherever it was required, regardless of what type of room it was?
Well, you know how it is in the program. You have to do that self-inventory, and you have to look inside. Before, I wouldn't look inside because I didn't want to see what was in there. But when I started looking inside and getting it out, learning how to get it out through, the program, that's kind of what songwriting is to me. I take a feeling that's inside of me. I can't pick a topic and write on it. I don't do that. And I don't co-write either. Because what I write about comes from inside of here.
Bill, you there?
All on there.
Yeah. Hold on, I lost you for a second. You said,
my call. I had one of them struggle calls.
Yeah, no problem. You said what you write about comes from here.
Yeah, it has to come from inside, or I can't do it. I don't. That's why I don't co-write or pick somebody will come. What'd you write about this? It's like I don't do it like that. I'm sorry.
What do you tell people? Because you still are plugged in and you're sharing your story here. But when somebody has a chance to wrangle you at a meeting or maybe outside of a meeting, and they know that you're in recovery, and they say, "Hey, man, like I don't think I can do it." Yeah, you're sober, it worked for you, but because we have that terminal uniqueness, I did. Like, there's no way this is going to work for me. What do you tell people that are hopeless?
Well, I'd tell them kind of a little bit about my story, and tell them, I didn't think there was any way, and neither did anybody in the group. Seriously, they told me later, they said they thought there was no way in hell I was going to sober up.
Yeah, I've had people tell me that too. Like, you were as hopeless as we had seen. And
I came into the meetings. It was this time of year, but it was kind of cool that year. And I don't wear those kind of clothes, but I had a cowboy shirt that didn't have any sleeves on it. And I had some old raggedy blue jeans that didn't fit. And the shoes were way bigger. They weren't mine. I don't know what left my shoes, and I smelled awful. And I was angry. I mean, it's totally insane. Detox. I was shaking and all that, you know. But I just share a little bit about what it's like for me. I try to remember what people told me when I came back, and and not get too deep because I was pretty shallow when I came in. Because if somebody said, I try not to tell people you need to, because if somebody said you need to, that my brain would shut off, my ears would go like that.
I'm
Because-
exactly the same way. Yeah, I mean, again, and so I try to take that into what I tell people now because I know that still doesn't work on me as much as
Yeah.
it should.
Yeah.
As much as I need to hear you need to do this, it still doesn't compute.
Yeah. It just doesn't work with, and now I've gotten to the point where I can, once I started realizing that people had feelings other than they, I used to didn't realize, you can know something and not realize it. I said,
Yeah.
and I knew people had feelings, but I didn't actually realize they had feelings.
What's the
Or
biggest
didn't
gift,
care.
What's the biggest gift you've gotten from being sober?
I would say self-esteem and just being able to care about people more than myself. I really actually care about other people. Before it was all about, I cared about alcohol and drugs more than anything. It was the number one thing in my life for so many years. And I was so miserable and so unhappy. And for the last, well, it took me a couple of years to get my head kind of screwed on straight. But for most of that time, I've been happy and content with my life. I don't get too high and too low. It's it's just been it's the greatest thing. It's the greatest thing that ever happened to it. And I started to, like Bill. Before I hated Bill, I wanted to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, no, I can't thank you enough. You literally, I mean, you've helped me today. You just got a great light coming off you, man. And I appreciate you. Anything you want to tell people about your music? Again, like I said, we'll put the link and all that stuff in here.
Well, one of the songs I wrote, a lot of Sweet Rain, the one I just showed you, the album.
Yeah.
That's the name of my album.
Sweet Rain?
That's my blues album.
Okay.
And then the other one I have is more of Americana, but it's called Destiny.
And I can say your full name, right?
Huh?
Can I say your full name?
Yes, that's fine.
Bill Sibley.
Yes.
There we go. Okay.
And my Destiny album, the song that's it's named after is about people that we have lost in the program. Women and girls that were really sweet. That's actually what it's about. And there was 3 ladies that passed away that I kind of wrote that song about, that were just friends and real sweet. But the girl that was gonna do she was an artist. She was gonna do the album, the single cover.
Okay.
On Spotify and all that. She was going to do the single cover for that song. And she went back out and then she died. And I played that at her funeral, at her memorial. And while we were there, they had some pictures and paintings that she had done. We were with her when they unplugged her. And there was a tear coming out her eye. When they unplugged her, her daughter was there, her mother, and me and my wife, Julie. And after I played that song at her memorial, I was walking by and looking at her paintings, and there was one, and there's of a girl, and there was a tear running down her eyes. And I asked her mother, I said, can I use that for her album cover? I mean, the single cover. And she said, yeah. So I used that on the single. But on my album cover's different. But the single cover of Destiny is her painting.
That's pretty amazing tribute by you and by her.
But yeah, that's one of my. I think that's probably the best song I ever wrote, or what I believe it is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this one today wasn't too bad that you told us, so I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you.
Thank you very much for your time, Bill. I'll send you, this will probably go up later this week. I'll send you a link to it so you can share with your wife and people you're close with and whoever else.
I sure will.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for letting me be on this.
Oh, dude, you made my day, dude. You really have. I appreciate it.
And I just want to tell everybody out there that, if sometimes you struggle, but there's hope, and just keep doing it. And it'll all work out. Either you'll get over it, or it'll go away.
Thanks so much, Bill. I appreciate it, dude. You were awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Take care, bud.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.